I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Detrick. Jordan Redaelli is on vacation.
No.
Andrew Kuo is here.
Very present here.
There will be no Andrew Kuo erasure this episode.
No. I've been listening to a lot of music lately. Instead, I know we do a pod, but I've been listening to, in my studio, I listen to pods maybe for 10 hours straight a day. I just listen to every single one of them. But I realized it's kind of getting in my head a little bit, so I've been trying to listen to more music. Totally changed my life. I forgot about music, Ben.
What music specifically has changed your life, being that you now listen to music again?
Well, I sometimes forget that my brain shouldn't be inundated with takes on impeachment hearings 10 hours straight. So I love the new FK Twigs album a lot. I think that thing is as good as advertised. I love the Vampire Weekend record so much. I think you can
Shout out to Vampire Weekend, friend of the pod. Well, Chris Thompson, friend of the pod, and former Cookies guest.
And yeah, all those guys are great. And that album is fantastic, man. I'm blanking, but rest in peace, Juice WRLD. That is a real heartbreaker. He is awesome. Was awesome.
Yeah, John Caramanica wrote a piece in the Times talking about the 3 tragic deaths of the SoundCloud era, and he was talking about X and Juice WRLD and Peep, and that they sort of were emblematic of both the promise and the unfulfilled promise of the SoundCloud emo generation of rappers.
I mean, I think they fulfilled their promise, but not as much as we like. Oh, well,
They all died basically as teenagers, so that was his real point, or in their early 20s, that they were unfulfilled because they died. It wasn't that they didn't give us good music.
100%. And
the old young death was more of the lack of fulfillment there.
Opioids are crazy, man. They're just wild. I mean, Juice WRLD had that lyric where he's like, I'm not going to make it past 21. And the week of his 21st birthday, he didn't make it. And, his jams were so good. And Peep didn't really get to put out his opus, but if you look around on Spotify, he has enough songs that kind of validate our list of him. He was awesome. He put out some really good songs, but Juice WRLD had hits.
Well, Peep was someone that you were an early cheerleader for, and I remember he actually wore one of your T-shirts showing Bart Simpson, or a Simpsons-esque character.
It's Jeremy
holding,
Lin, Ben.
Styrofoam cups with lean in it.
Yeah, and man, that was before I kind of realized how awful that stuff was, and it was kind of a trope that a lot of rappers would rap about and show us. But nah, I don't feel great about that T-shirt design. It was when Jeremy Lin went to Houston, and I was kind of bummed out that the Knicks did not keep him in New York. So I made that T-shirt in effigy. Don't have a cow, man.
Well, my own experience with Juice WRLD.
You spent a day with him. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I wrote a story about Juice WRLD. I want to say it was in spring.
Yeah, man.
I'd have to look up exactly when it occurred. It was not that long ago. And he was in New York for some promotional events for his last album. And we went to Greenwood Cemetery, which is out kind of near Sunset Park. It's a really, really beautiful cemetery. I know that sounds a little morbid, but it's not the case.
It's beautiful.
It's got rolling hills and these incredible mausoleums and monuments. It's really a treasure of New York City. If you have a chance to go out there and walk around, especially on a nice spring day or in autumn, it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous jewel of New York City. Really is. I cannot say that enough. So we went out there because his music was so gothic and so emo, and because he discussed those ideas of death. And, you know, in retrospect, we were not poking fun at it, but in retrospect, there is an angle of sort of like, ew. You know, we went out there and talked about death and it being this mysterious passage and
an inspiration for something like music. And it's a tradition, and for such an untraditional artist, it was a nice cross section.
But it's, you know, just from a personal perspective, the fact that I walked around a cemetery with a guy and we went into, you know, crypts and you know, we're talking about these same subjects, to have him pass away at such a young age and so close to the time when we did this story feels creepy. Like, it's obviously tragic, but it's also like, oh, ooh, that was, I mean, I'm glad we were able to do that story, and I'm glad we wrote the stuff we did, and I'm proud of it, and I think he liked it, and I'm happy with the work, of course, but just in the context, it's just a little like eerie. I don't know.
100%.
But anyway,
yeah.
the main thing is not that. The main thing is that this is really tragic. Mm-hmm. You know, my own feelings in the story we did are very secondary to the fact that Juice WRLD was an extremely charming and talented kid. And to hang out with him for the day, you saw this, I don't know how you characterize musical genius or whatever. He was just a very sparkling person. But he also was someone who was self-medicating rampantly. And I saw that, and I alluded to it in the story. And when we get to the end, we're talking about Basquiat and Basquiat's grave and opiates. And, you know, this was his deal. He was using that stuff all the time, and he was using it all day. And when he died of an overdose, I was not stunned, because I knew what the volume of his ingestion potentially was.
Yeah. And it's wild how we were so terrified, rightfully, of crack when it was a big thing. And you can hear it in the music. You know, I always think that people love 90s hip-hop so much because of the BPMs and the sounds, and that was very crack-related. You know, that was part of the scene back then in New York. And to have it switch to the South and this new drug, you can hear it in the music as well. And to me, it's more interesting. And we're seeing, it's a lot, man. Like, I can't believe these three kids. Well, you know, X was murdered, but well, it's wild that the three of them kind of died in the last couple years.
I mean, I saw Juice WRLD nodding out in the middle of like an interview.
Man,
you know, I was talking to him, and all of a sudden he was just unresponsive, and I kind of like turned my head to look at him, and he was just kind of like leaning back in his chair, and then he would snap out of it and be like up and dancing and talking with people and being, you know, the life of the bus, and then he would kind of like sit back down and slump again, and it was because of what he was ingesting. Like, I saw it.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we saw, this is such a downer, man, but we saw Peep kind of leave this earth on Twitter. You know, his friend filmed it not knowing. That was crazy. We saw X kind of take his last breath on Twitter. It was wild. And but just to keep it up, you know, like, or upbeat, I was, you know, our buddy, our mutual friend owns a very boomer-esque bar, and he was advertising a golden age of hip-hop night. And he was like, only classics from the 90s and early aughts. And I'm like, no, the golden age is now. Like, you should just be blasting Juice WRLD all night. Like, this, I mean, no, we always make fun of Cameron and the Diplomats and Nas and all that, and that stuff was awesome. I'm not gonna pretend that I didn't love all that stuff, that I haven't seen Cameron perform like a dozen times. He's amazing. But this generation of rappers, the influence of Drake, the singing, I just think like is the best version of music I've heard in my life.
And let's also not forget that the memento mori of these guys, that death instinct, that darkness, that living on the edge in a way that we can't or we aren't willing to do, is part of what makes them compelling artists. And that nihilism comes across artistically and is exciting or dangerous and conjures emotions.
And it validates our generation, right? Like the Kurt Cobain.
That's what I was going to say. This is, we can talk about these deaths of these three, men, but Biggie died, Tupac died, Big L died, Big Pun died. There's no shortage of Freaky Ta. There's no shortage of 90s boomer artists who were cut short before they reached their prime. Scott LaRock. I mean, there's a ton of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Old Dirty Bastard.
Mm-hmm.
They Pimp C. Let's not say that dying tragically and young is something that is only unique to this generation. And as you said, fucking Jimi Hendrix. Jesus.
Right, yeah. I mean, for sure. And all those grunge guys, Chris
That was their deal.
Stone Temple Pilots, Alice in Chains, they're not here anymore.
That was the deal. They are very similar to this generation's opioid rappers in that regard, that there was a culling from their ranks.
It's so crazy, right? Like to talk about statistics all the time with basketball and the stock market. And sometimes if I had a friend who was like, oh, I'm an up-and-coming rapper, like I'm getting some heat, like I'm going out there, I'm doing this. I'm like, what's the percentage you might die? 5, 6, 7%? Like, take care of yourself, man, because what you're doing, like, we just have stats now, That's dark, but, yo, man, that life is hard, and being on the road sucks. And, we always talk about this in terms of basketball players and their mental health. I'm like, it ain't easy being Juice WRLD, that's for sure.
So, yes, let's just bundle up this sad subject with rest in peace to Juice WRLD, who I feel lucky that I had the chance to spend a small amount of time with him, because he was a really talented and interesting and super smart kid. And he had that amazing Zoomer energy where he learned to play keyboards off of YouTube tutorials, and like he was great. And whether or not you love his music, he was talented, and it's worth a listen if you haven't really checked it out.
Juice WRLD.
Yeah, R.I.P.
For sure.
Moving along to other subjects in the news. Art Basel was going on over the last week. The Basel boys were Baseling. One of the pieces of art that attracted the most attention was a banana duct taped to a wall. As the resident art expert on the Cookies Basketball podcast, Andrew Kuo, tell us what to think about a banana duct taped to a wall.
It's awesome. Maurizio Catalan is the artist involved, and he, the creator of this piece, and he has a tradition of creating thoughtful works. You can call him a conceptual artist. Solo show at the Guggenheim, where he hung all of his sculptures in the middle of the rotunda, created this piece, and it's awesome. And I think that everybody reacted in the way that he wanted them to react, which was whatever gripe, whatever anger you had in you came out with this piece. It was like a trigger for anything you were thinking. And I thought it was quickly becoming like one of the most memorable, if not greatest artworks he's done. But in general, like we'll will always have the banana. And no matter who you talk to, like your mom, someone on the street being like, have you heard of this banana? I'm like, this is amazing. Art is amazing.
You tweeted about it maybe 100 times over the course of, I don't know, 2 or 3 days.
Yes.
What was it about the banana that resonated so much with you?
Well, I tweeted like all the tropes that go into talking about a piece of art and just put in the word banana. So it's like, my kid can make a better banana. I've seen better bananas. If you like the banana so much, name 3 bananas. Was
this more of zombie banana or banana formalism?
Shoot a 3, banana coward. But it was awesome. So like, if you look at it as an artwork, I think like it's a little complicated because it has fumes of Andy Warhol and his Velvet Underground Banana album cover. So all of a sudden you think about the temporary nature of this thing, and it's only going to last a few days. Bananas don't last very long. It's going to maybe last the length of this fair, and it becomes melancholy. But I reside in the world of whist, so I'm like, oh, this is so temporary, and a lot of people died in the 80s, and that's very sad to me. And I was like, whoa, that's a really powerful piece, but it didn't make me mad. But then now I'm realizing lately that I should get mad about more things, but that's not how I feel about many things. So
you think you should be mad at the banana? Or are you more mad at the duct tape? Or are you mad at the response? Are you mad at people who praise it? Are you mad at people who criticize it? What is the anger that you are failing to conjure here?
I don't know, but my main thought is the way that people talk about it in a negative light. And a guy took it off the wall and ate it, and I thought that was really disrespectful to what we're trying to do as people who make things in the world. And it is whatever you want it to be, because it's such a ridiculous gesture, and it's sort of like a meme. It only lives when we talk about it, and this thing took off. It has like a life to it, and the more we talk about it, the more it lives on, and it's the thing. Like the banana just doesn't exist anymore. And there's a lot of artists who do this, like who stage happenings and who don't really give you anything to necessarily see or sell or hold. I mean, actually strike that. You can buy all these ideas, and one of my favorites was this artist Chris Burden, who is no longer with us. He's dead. I don't know why I said he's no longer with us, but I think with Gagosian in LA wanted to buy a couple $1 million worth of gold and just sell it as a sculpture, and he couldn't procure the gold because of the insurance issues. So he had an opening where there was no gold there, but he sold the piece, and just through the appreciation of gold of that month, the value of the work went up because gold had a good month. But it never existed. It was bought, and the treasury still holds that artwork.
Or what about something like Rob Pruitt, who had huge long lines of cocaine, and that at the opening the people did the cocaine?
Right. But the caveat was he was going to film you. So that is a little bit different because there's evidence, there's a video of it. So you can have all the free coke you want, but he's going to film you. And people sniffed it all up. And I love when there's controversy and be like, that's not actual art. And to me, the tape banana was actual art, and it was the thing that I love to think about. I always think about simple gestures like that as being brave, and maybe I always look at the list of artists who get MacArthur grants, like the Genius Award, and I'm always like, oh, they just do a ton of little things on big surfaces because it looks like The Accountant. It looks brilliant because it's all this little, and I don't know, some of my paintings look like that. I do a lot of little things on big surfaces, and sometimes I feel like if I was really brave, I would just paint it white. Of course, that would change everything. But I saw the taping of the banana as kind of like, I don't know, brave gesture.
To me, I don't understand when people get furious about trying to define what is art and what isn't. I don't know why we need to differentiate between a carefully sketched figure drawing of a bowl of fruit versus a banana taped to a wall. Like, isn't the whole point of art that it's expression and that we don't need to say, well, this is and this isn't? We can say what we like. We can say, I think this is bad, this is derivative, this is just goofy. We can say that I would certainly not want to have a banana taped to my wall, but the whole point is that it's goofy and it's expression. And I don't know, I'm trying to think of how this applies to basketball.
Travel truthing, right?
People are mad at a James Harden because what he's doing is not basketball. This is not what you're supposed to do. Ben Simmons is supposed to take 12-footers. That's not basketball, what he's doing. It's something foreign and different and uncomfortable.
Steph Curry.
Yeah, and Steph Curry or the Houston Rockets in general taking a zillion threes. This is not basketball. They run down, they pass the ball around the perimeter, they chuck up threes. Where's the mid-range? Where's the post? This is not basketball. This urge to define sport by rigid parameters is just foreign to me.
Yeah, and it's a nice place to be if you're not thinking about that. And I was watching the TNT guys last night during the Sixers game, and they are like these art critics who are saying things like that's not the way we do things, and the process is kind of a fraudulent act, therefore the Sixers are a fraudulent team. And I think we need that kind of starting point, but if we always go back to it, we're not making any progress. It's sort of like, rest in peace Juice WRLD, but you should really hear UGK. I'm like, yes, both can exist at the same time. And Maurizio Catalan, the artist who made the banana piece, has a good sense of humor, and all of his pieces are either really dark or really funny, and this is no different. And we should, as like kind of just like a looking at stuff community, understand where he's coming from.
That's true. And moving along from defining what is and what is not art, there is something that is concrete, and it's that the Knicks are not part of the NBA. That we do know. We know that. That is written in stone, etched, engraved permanently. The Knicks, not part of the NBA.
No.
And they
happily
have exorcised themselves from the National Basketball Association.
They're in
the
a better
news,
place.
However. They're in the news now because...
No way. What happened?
After lengthy speculation, the Knicks, earlier this week, fired their coach of 19 months, David Fizdale. It's David, right? David Fizdale? Yeah, I think.
We hardly knew you.
I'm a Fizz?
Take that for data.
After long speculation that he was going to be fired, he was fired.
The meat shield.
He was absolutely a meat shield. What does this mean? Not that the Knicks are going to get back in the NBA, but what does this mean in the short term? The Knicks have fired their coach. What does it mean, Andrew Kuo?
Nothing. It's all a bunch of, like, it's a very banana, man. We're reading this wrong. David Fizdale is the taped banana. It is whatever you thought about the Knicks previously, and it just happened. Cookies is I've been on Cookies advocating that they should just not worry about Fizz, and he's not the reason you're angry or the team is losing, because they have a bunch of Morai and a big Taj.
Wait. You're saying that despite Fizdale being canned, the wins aren't going to start piling up? I thought the problem was solved.
Oh, mission accomplished. This is all systems go. Eighth seed, here we come. Right, and we say meat shield because the problems with the Knicks, if they have a problem, not to kink shame the Knicks.
Do they?
Maybe to them, no. They're beautiful the way they are, but it probably is player evaluation. It's probably signing Elfrid Payton and desperately getting him into the lineup. it's probably having terrible or like mid-range draft picks, and the best player you can get in that situation is Baby Yoda, Frank Ntilikina, and he's not a world changer, but he's okay. The problems aren't the coach. The problems aren't the players. The problem is not even Perry. The problem is they dance under bridges with their friends.
So there's been a whole raft of articles from the New York Times, the New York Post, wherever. Everyone's come to the same conclusion. Dolan should fire himself. That's just sort of a... Everyone has fallen upon the same answer. It's Dolan's fault. Is he, though? Is it Dolan's fault?
No. Yes and no, for sure. Okay, this is where I have to train myself to actually get mad at something. It is Dolan's fault. But I can forgive him because there's been a lot of success with really dumb owners of teams that's worked out. You know, we got an undisclosed source tell us a few nights ago that Dolan, just giving us like a character kind of like framework for this guy, and he's very detail oriented, and he may have an overreaching kind of involvement in things
and it's
in the
not
corporation.
Detail oriented in necessarily like the way it's used as a compliment.
Yes, right.
It's that
meddlesome.
He is meddlesome and very interested in the minutia in terms of press, in terms of generally everything. And he's also capricious in that regard, that he might be really into something and he's interested in it, and then he just loses focus on it and goes on to something else. This is just what was told to us. I could not tell you. I've never worked in that office. I have no idea. But it was that he is very involved, but sporadically.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of my friends is manages bands and has bands play MSG. So Dolan reached out to him at one point and was like, "Can you help my band, JD and the Straight Shot, do what your bands do?" And my buddy was like, "What's the deal with Dolan? Like, what is he like? I know you're a basketball fan." This guy isn't a basketball fan. So he's like, "Just tell me about him as a person." I'm like, you know, all things considered, he might be a fine guy to work with. But based off of his history with running this team, I would say he's probably very specific in what he wants. And the relationship ended up not working out. But he... I walked away with the impression that Dolan had a very specific long view of what JD and the Straight Shot would become, which is not different than how he deals with the Knicks, because it seems like he's involved in every one of these interactions and movements. And the only time I can remember in recent history where he wasn't was maybe like a year of Phil Jackson.
I think we can say that after years of public encouragement for him to step back and hire someone who knew what they were doing and leave the meddling alone, he tried it. He attempted to do that and was more or less good to his word. He brought in Phil Jackson. We didn't hear shit about Dolan. Phil went and did his thing for a couple of years.
Joakim Noah, baby.
Then public sentiment turned against Phil, and Dolan came back in and fired him. He did what the people wanted him to do.
Yes.
For a few years and a few recent years. So I'm with the criticism of Dolan, but he did what people asked.
Yeah.
And the Knicks were no better off for it.
We're getting mad at the wrong stuff, right? We bring up the Oakley situation. I'm with Dolan's angle on that. You know, if an ex-employee walks into your building and starts a fight, you kind of got to kick him out, and that sucks. And the optic of that was terrible. But when you step back, I'm like, oh yeah, Oakley, that was tough for Dolan. What is he going to do? Let Oakley just berate him in his building? But I think we when I say we get mad at the wrong stuff, is we should never have been thinking about Fizdale. We should... I try to get in the heads of the critics of Fizz, and I always end up at the place where I think they think this team was an 8th seed. This team wasn't built to do anything.
this is my take on the Knicks and Dolan in general. He doesn't seem to have anyone who works for him, who can convince him of a good course of action. And what I mean by that is, there's no reason to look at a 17-win team and say, we can add some mediocre vets who are borderline starters and contend for an 8 spot. But Dolan seemingly wants to contend for an 8 spot. And that's what he said to them. Guys, I know we didn't get these big guys, like free agents, but I don't want to lose. I don't want to be humiliated in the Garden. I want to compete. I want to contend. I want to be tough. I want to do all these things. And he doesn't have someone who works for him who can say, big dog, my guy, I hear you. I hear you. I want the Garden to be rocking too. I want that energy when you sit in your front row and there's celebrities there and people are cheering and someone in the Knicks punches someone in the face and you're loving it. That's New York City basketball, baby.
Enforce that court.
But, and I know you want that. I know you want that, big dog. But what if there's another way? What if we can put up with a couple seasons of being bad, and we're going to introduce some young guys to the fans, and we're going to let them build allegiances to these young players and dedication and root for them. And we're just going to go real organic, and we're not going to push to win right away. Can I convince you, based on looking at what Philadelphia did and what the Nets did and what the Hawks are doing right now, can I convince you that this is a reasonable path as opposed to face-punching Garden protectors?
No, because the Hawks are terrible. Trae Young is crying after games. People don't believe in the Sixers because they think Ben Simmons is fraudulent.
That's what I mean. There's no one who can convince him that this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't believe you. I want to contend.
But you can work with that. This is not an impossible task. This is not like gravity, an uncontrollable just like thing of life. Like, okay, so Dolan thinks this way. You can work with this, but, you know, like, not all team presidents are created equal. And Steve Mills might be a great guy. And I think from all reports, he's lovable. But he might not be good at this job. And that's okay. I forgive him. You know, like, Dan Gilbert lucked into a championship. And I think Steve Mills and James Dolan could luck into a championship.
So here's a parallel, I think. There's obviously the Lakers parallel, where they screwed around, made poor decisions, and then LeBron rolled in and was like, hey, I'm here. And then Rich Paul and crew came in and said, Anthony Davis is coming. And all of a sudden, you've got the best record in the league and you're a contender when you didn't really earn it. You drafted okay, but you didn't really do much to deserve being, 18-3 or whatever the Lakers are exactly. But it happened anyway. But the Knicks are a little like the Timberwolves over the last few years, where they would make an effort in free agency to sign some vets, to get better, to improve, and then they wouldn't. And then they'd be back in the lottery, they'd take another guy, and they'd take Chris Dunn, they'd take Wiggins with the pick they got from Kevin Love, and those guys didn't really work out, and then they hit on Cat, and they had a new future. And they fucked around, and then eventually they hired Rosas this last offseason. And they're not a good team, but suddenly they're playing smart. You look at their shot charts and it duplicates Morey ball. They're making wiser personnel decisions. They're going to try to dump Wiggins on the Knicks. I mean, all it takes is just making the right hire. It doesn't need to be Ujiri as the savior coming down from the north to resurrect the franchise. You could just hire someone good and get out of the way.
That's a big ask, man. But yes, you're totally right. And I don't think that
you don't have to hire God. But you can just hire a good GM.
But there's a scarcity of good GMs, and they're all accounted for. And you brought up the Lakers, and it made me think, right? Like, when I was in my formative years, I thought the biggest challenge I would have in my life would be being short. It ends up not being the case. The challenge in my life is like my bias and like me trying to.
Oh, I thought it was that you're too strong.
Right.
You don't know your own strength. And it just creates weird situations where you're smashing pint glasses with your hands. sitting on stools that break into splinters. It's just really awkward to go to the bar with you.
I go through a laptop a month because I just pound the shit out of that keyboard. But no, but where I'm going with this is I think Dolan looks at the Lakers and be like, well, they got AD and LeBron and they had a bevy of picks to swap out for this superstar. Why can't we do that? I'm like, oh, that's not your problem. Your problem is no one likes you. You think people like you because of the Empire State Building and Katz's Deli. They don't like those things that much. They like Jeannie Buss enough to do it there, but you're not even in that conversation.
Compounding this issue is that the Nets are now a viable challenger to the mantle of New York City.
Are they? Are they?
I didn't say the Nets are cool, but they are a viable contender. If you want to be in New York City as a market and your sneaker company is urging you to go there by dangling golden and platinum carrots in front of your nose, you now have an alternative option that was not a viable option even 2 or 3 years ago.
I agree. And all they have to do is start winning games, and we'll see a shift. But they're very far from that, too.
I don't want to berate the Knicks any further. They don't deserve it. They're not in the NBA. They're doing the best they can. They are dancing under bridges to Mudvayne.
Stop kink shaming. They're
Yes.
perfect the way they are.
I will say this, though. Their young talent is not that good. And we have not necessarily
You're
seen
hurting
them.
my feelings.
But this is one issue, right? Because
man.
if we're going to turn the team over to the young guys, which they should do, I don't know what we're going to see. Because they've got a fleet of lottery picks there. They've got some second rounders they got. It's not bad.
No, it's a profitable situation. I think a lot of people looking to invest should look at the Knicks.
But they haven't hit.
No.
And that's a problem. I really love Mitchell Robinson. He's sick. He can't stand the court, but he is a keeper. But they have not hit. They have not gotten a guy that you can look at out of these last few years, whether it's Frankie Smokes or Kevin Knox or RJ Barrett, and say, well, at least we've got a building block here. They don't have one.
And that was just bad luck. I like all those picks at the time, but they were low. I believe Knox was a 7 or 8 and Smokes the same. And they missed out on the top 2 this year. John Morant was the cutoff of that tier.
Had the Knicks been as shitty as they should have been 2 years ago, they could have gotten Luka Doncic and we'd be having a very different conversation.
Exactly.
They would have Porzingis and Doncic, and they would be the Dallas Mavericks, and Tim Hardaway Jr., and they'd be posting a 117 offensive rating and the third best team in the East.
Cuban stole
It was that
MSG's
close, man.
soul. Yo,
If they had lost a few more games, they could have had Doncic and KP and Hardaway and just been rocking.
it would have been incredible. Yeah, the Dallas Mavericks stole the Knicks' soul. Like in a video game when you just yank someone's weird ghost inside.
Sweet revenge for the Knicks spiriting away Tyson Chandler and Jason Kidd and recreating the Nowitzki team around Melo.
RJ Barrett
Karmic.
is exactly who we thought he was, and I'm really happy with him, and I'm still happy with him. And he's gonna dip like he has been recently, but he's a rotation guy, and he's gonna have a long career in the NBA. Not that different than Jabari Parker, who is having a good month, but he is not a star player. Like the Knicks have yet to hit on a star player, and not to get into a Simmons thing, but that was Hinkie's design. He was like, we need to identify and hit on stars in the draft, and they got 2.
And we're going to talk about Joel Embiid momentarily. And to that point, Embiid was the best talent out of that draft. He went third because he had foot issues, which cost him 2 years and probably cost Sam Hinkie his job. But he was the best talent in that draft. They took Okafor, who didn't pan out, but he was regarded as one of the best talents in that draft. Nerlens Noel, they took, I want to say, 7th due to injury. He would have been first in that class selected, most likely. Mm-hmm. Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz, which was post-Hinkie. But in general, Philly took a bunch of cracks at the very, very top of the draft and at getting the best possible talent. Some worked out, some didn't. But as a policy, drafting high and getting the guys who are regarded as the most talented in their class reaps rewards of having stars. Huge. And the Knicks do not have anyone who resembles a star at all.
No. And Mitch Robinson is a different kind of star, and that was a big hit in the second round. So I'm ecstatic about Mitch still, even with his boneheaded fouling. That's fixable.
Love him.
Pay him whatever he wants. Just keep him in the Garden. But this is like a failure of design, right? Because I believe the Knicks have not retained a draft pick in the last 20 years or so. I think they've signed and traded. David Lee was the closest one.
Wasn't the last one on Charlie Ward or someone?
Yeah. They just, by design, they don't think in terms. They're different, man. It just hits different for MSG.
So moving along to Embiid, who I just referred to, he's been facing some criticism this year. And he faced some criticism in the playoffs last year when he was sick and people blamed his poor performance against the Toronto Raptors on his conditioning and on him having the shits being a product of not wanting it enough, I guess. And the Sixers are playing well. There's been some obvious growing pains about a team
new personnel
with 4 big men and 1 small forward and trying to figure out how that works offensively. But after last night's victory over Denver, he came off a bit morose. And if you read the words, he sounds like sad and depressed. If you watch him deliver them, it's more contemplative than gloomy. Mm-hmm. But here's what he said. They asked him about trying to fire up the crowd, and he said, "I haven't done it enough all season. I have not been having fun like usually. Like I said, because I'm still trying to figure it out, how to make it work and all that stuff. It goes back to me being mature, and one of the biggest parts of my game is just having fun. And by having fun, it's talking trash. But that part has kind of been cut." And then he went on to mention, "I'm not trying to be a distraction to the team. The fight with Towns happened. We had good momentum. And from there, we kind of lost it. We lost a couple games. So I'm not trying to be a distraction. Sometimes I might be childish." And he says, "I care about being a role model in the organization." And he doesn't think this is working, but I'm going to keep doing it. As in, he doesn't think being mature is working because it takes away the joy and makes him less effective. What are you reading into this? What is he saying here?
Growing up is hard to do, man. It's like, youth is amazing, and it doesn't last forever. And I think bodies change and brains change, and like, it's kind of sad to see Embiid grow up and be this self-aware. He's awesome. He's so self-aware. I love him, and I love this team for that reason. And yeah, man, now he has different pressures on him. And like, the joy part is over. Potentiality has been realized. We understand that you're amazing. Now it's on him to do the job. And there's a sort of joylessness to that task, right? Being like, we already know that you're great. How come you're not as great as you were then? Or how come you're not as great as the greatest player we can think of?
Embiid is very smart. Embiid is also very emotional. Is he a reliable narrator here? Is his account of needing to be mature and the, I guess, inference that he's been criticized for being immature, is that true? Like, is that actually what's happening here? Is that what he's really glum about? Because I didn't hear him get a lot of heat after the cat scrap. Karl Anthony Towns was the one that got choked out by the Peacemaker. Joe walked off and, he got suspended, but he didn't really do anything wrong. When we talk about trash talking, I don't recall a flurry of criticism towards Joe for talking trash. I do remember him saying, "I'm not going to talk trash this coming year." So I'm saying, is Joe discussing trash talking immaturity? Is he really talking about something else?
Go on.
Is he talking about, perhaps, feeling like he hasn't been as effective this year? Feeling as if the abundance of other talented players on the team has taken away from his role as the undisputed alpha? Because he mentioned a thing later in that quote where he's like, well, I'll just go set screens if that helps the team. And I'm like, this is about something different. This is about how you got taken out of the game in the closing minutes to get a ball handled around the court. This is about the lineups that you're in with a bunch of untalented shooters instead of having Jimmy Butler and JJ Redick handcuffed to you rotationally. Last year, his most comfortable play was a little two-man game with Redick along the high elbow or near the three-point line. It would be a dribble handoff. Redick would come off of a curl and look to shoot a three. The defenders would have to scramble, letting Embiid go backdoor. And this created a lot of statistical assists for Embiid, despite the fact that he didn't really have to pass the ball. It also created open threes, and it created a lane for him to attack the basket. It was one of the few ways he was able to easily score. And he didn't have to labor in the post. He didn't have to do anything crazy. It was just a smooth transactional dribble handoff with him and JJ that they worked at and they got good at. And he doesn't have that this year. If you look at his numbers, they're not specifically worse than in prior seasons. They're kind of in line with his averages. He's just shooting a little bit less. He's playing a little bit less. He's not getting quite as many shots around the basket. I just think he's a little discontent around his role on the team being a bit diminished. And he's using the maturity thing and the trash talking thing as a way to kind of say, I'm making a sacrifice, without calling out how he actually is making a sacrifice in his mind. Does this make sense?
Yeah, and where I was going previously is like, I'm not even sure the idea of maturity exists. We just identify it if it fits what we want to see. And I always think of J.R. Smith. Like he's the same as he's always been, but he's a grizzled veteran who should behave a certain way. But like, is a young player mature or are they boring? Like you could frame it any which way. And I think what Embiid is talking about, the idea of joy, falls in line with that too.
I think he's facing more double teams this season because the Sixers don't have quick or dynamic shooters. They don't have quick guys or dynamic shooters. They don't have... Their guys are very... Like Al Horford, he can shoot threes, but he doesn't shoot threes when Embiid is on the court, which is counterintuitive to what you would expect out of a stretch big. But he doesn't. So I think Embiid is facing more hard doubles, but he's also just around more congestion. He's not getting easy baskets via Jimmy Butler or Redick. Tobias Harris is a chucker. Simmons and Horford get to play together in alternate lineups. He doesn't really have a running mate because Josh Richardson has been hurt. I think he's just kind of struggling a bit, and he wants people to know it.
Yeah, it's a different... The spacing is an issue. When you put all these large lads on the court, it's going to be a thing, and maybe that's exactly what he's talking about. The joy has been kind of zapped from his game, sort of like when Mark Jackson didn't let Steph Curry be himself, and then Steve Kerr or whoever told Steph Curry to be himself, and they had an opportunity for him to have some fun. And the Sixers, you can frame it as they're all business because they have all the pieces, and this is serious stuff because they're in contention for a championship. Or you could say like the spacing doesn't provide Joe enough joy in his game. And I'm with you on that take. What he's talking about is an architectural issue, not an emotional issue.
Yeah. I also don't think the Sixers spacing is particularly bad. You look at a lot of plays, and I'm a big fan of Embiid. He's an incredible defensive player. He can score efficiently in bunches. There's certain matchups where he just obliterates people. Like he is a very good offensive player. But man, there are plays when he has the ball, he starts attacking, a double comes, he throws a wild pass. That's on him.
Yeah.
There are other ones when the double comes, he doesn't see it. He turns and he spins, and all of a sudden there's someone all over him, and he travels. He bounces the ball out of bounds. That's on him. It's not a matter of disrespect from the opponents for the Sixers' perimeter threats.
You don't think they're being honest?
They're not honest. They would leave Redick. They'll leave Tobias. They leave Mike Scott. It's not about them leaving Simmons. It's not even about them leaving Horford. They will leave anyone. And Brett Brown specifically puts a shooter one pass away from Embiid. They'll leave that guy sometimes too. You know, this is on him. And it's also the difficulty in 2020 of running an offense out of a post player who is not an outlier passer. It's just going to be hard. There's going to be turnovers. It's going to be frustrating. And when you're playing a team like Washington, when you can absolutely destroy Von Wagner, whatever his name is there, Wagner, they're going to run 2-3 other guys at you, and you're going to be swarmed all the time, and he's going to be flopping, and it's annoying. And that's what it is. He's having an annoying season.
Yeah, he's not as fun to watch. I mean, we talked about it last episode. The self-awareness is visible in a possession. He second guesses himself all the time, and it leads to jab steps and weird outlet passes and kind of an offensive foul every now and then. But that said, the team is doing fine. The team is fine.
It is very weird that there's this sense of gloom and constant brink of apocalypse regarding the Sixers. Over the last 13 games, they are 11-2. Their offense is ranked 10th in the NBA. Their defense is ranked 2nd, and they have the 3rd best net rating. That is an extremely good team and a contender that we are bitching about incessantly, that guys aren't having fun, this and that, Simmons is this, and they're really good, and that's without Josh Richardson. And this is with Thibault only now starting to emerge as a potential real difference maker. This team is good.
It's I mean, we say this ad nauseum. They are as good as advertised. We thought they would be this good, and they're exactly this good. And they're just very interesting. They're compelling. It goes back to Hinkie and the latent anger people have of the way this team was constructed, and they think it wasn't done fairly. This is the tape banana, right? They are like, why would anyone pay $120,000 for a tape banana? I'm like, it's one of the great artworks because everyone knows about it. Like, it's just a compelling story. So we kind of pick at it in a way that it gives it a different life, in the way that we'll never care about the Blazers. Did I fall asleep? I said the Trailblazers and then I blacked out.
I mean, I woke up and I saw Melo playing for them, and that was cool. And then I sort of dozed off again, and then I heard that another sad boy, your man Kevin Love, is now eager to retire in Portland.
Weird. I mean, yeah, there's rumors that Kevin Love is asking to be out of that, like the great city of Cleveland, the great vacation city of Cleveland.
I mean, it is Venice on the Cleveland River. What are they on? Erie?
Yeah, maybe.
Sorry, not a geography pod. It is what it is. So your man Kevin Love, let's just tell people what he has endured. So Love was part of the Cavaliers championship core with LeBron, now in Los Angeles, Kyrie, now in Brooklyn, and he's left in Cleveland. He's everyone else left after high school and went to college, and he's just there, sitting there, Clevelanding it up.
With Tristan Thompson.
And they were in a rebuild. They are a, how would you describe a team that's not in the NBA? There's got to be a phrase for this. They are relegated. They're in relegation. And he's a guy who's too talented for that. You know, he's a many-time All-Star. He is a really, really good player. He's 31 years old. He's not down for this Cleveland life anymore. Do you want Kevin Love? if you're the Portland Trailblazers? What team does? He doesn't make sense in Cleveland. That's fair.
Yeah. I mean, on the court, he makes sense on many teams, but I don't know what he would provide the Blazers. I fell asleep again. I was thinking about the Blazers, and then I passed out. What happened?
I don't know. I heard some bars from Dame Lillard, and then it kind of just went to a gray, fuzzy static.
I mean, I think he would make a very interesting shooting team over there in Portland, but it's not very sexy, man. Kevin Love going to the Blazers team just like doesn't move the needle at all. I think Carmelo Anthony, them guaranteeing his contract for this year, I thought was a mistake. It's cheap; it's only a couple $1 million, but he's gonna get like minutes. You got to take him off the court.
I'm sorry, are you talking about the Blazers? Huh? Wait, what happened?
Was it a dream?
No, it's funny because I passed out and I woke up and I was like, it was all a dream. And then I looked at Basketball Reference and it was the Blazers salary cap situation. What, did that happen or not?
Listen, you just have to sign CJ McCollum. What choice do you have?
So the problem with Kevin Love is not that he's a bad player. I think he's declined and he's diminished, but he's useful. He's a good passer. He can really shoot. He can rebound. He's become a bit of a tweener.
He gets hurt too much.
He's not really a center at this point. I mean, he never has been, but as the game has shifted, he hasn't become a viable defensive center. He's kind of too slow to guard the agile fours that we now have in the league. He's a bit of a positionless on defense, but a very talented offensive player. He does make $29 million, then 31, then 31, then 29 again, going through 2023.
His raw numbers are not great. Offensive, defensive, 108, 111. BPM
we're talking about
0.
a guy who is 31 now.
Yeah.
So you're going to get him until he's 34, 35. He's going to be making $30 million a year, and he's injury prone. There are not a lot of destinations for that player.
New York, baby.
I mean...
No, it's not going to happen. They're not doing these deals anymore. We haven't done one. Oh, yeah. Oh, I mean, Wiggins season, but...
Wiggins, Love, the Timberwolves that never were, in the Garden, MSG, Bright Lights, Big City, Katz's Deli, Statue of Liberty,
Times Square,
the Rockettes,
Scar's
Clandestino.
Pizza. Yeah, I mean, I think there has been jokes that the Knicks would be interested in Love, but the Knicks haven't done this, and I think other teams are behaving more Knicksian than the Knicks actually are, like the Nets and the Blazers.
Go off. The Nets are the new Knicks. Tell me why. Tell me why.
Huge contracts, huge names that are flawed. I mean, it's not... Shout out to Kevin Durant, who can't control that injury. It was horrible, horrible luck. But it's a classic Knicks move to be like, oh, we'll wait a year for him because he's the biggest name and we want to put people in the seats, even though that might be like not the best investment to make. And Joseph Tsai is no dummy. He's a great businessman. But they are building that team currently like the Knicks would have previously. In my opinion. I just don't like those two signings. As soon as Durant got hurt, stuff changed. But I like the moves with Taurean Prince. I like Spencer Dinwiddie so much. But they invested in Karis LeVert. He's very injury prone. Like, this looks like a Knicks team. It looks like the Knicks soul a little bit.
So if the Knicks were in the NBA, they would look like the Brooklyn Nets. That's what you're trying to explain to our easily convinced gullible listeners.
If the Knicks washed the white face paint off, wore a color other than black, and stopped dancing under highways, then they would resemble the Nets, in my opinion.
Can I tell you about another mediocre team that I do like?
What's up?
The Oklahoma City Thunder. They are now 11-12, 7th in the Western Conference playoff hunt. They are seeded. They might blow this team apart at any moment, which gives it a sort of beautiful fragility. That's a pretty good team that's winning games. They're not great. They're a pretty good team who might make the playoffs that could be ripped asunder in an instant.
Shout out to the new cop on the block, or the old cop on the block, with that new juice, CP3.
My guy, CP3. I think he is kind of almost a dark horse MVP candidate.
He hasn't
even been that great, but he's been such a dick.
He's having a good season.
No, he's been good. He hasn't been great by CP3 standards. We're talking about the greatest point guard in the history of the league. He's been pretty good.
Yeah.
He's old. But man, he is copping it up in a really enjoyable way.
Shout out to Officer Snitchell.
Officer Snitchell, not enjoyable cop. CP3, a hilarious cop.
A wonderful cop, right. Right, like Eddie Murphy. You just love him. Beverly Hills Cop. Putting bananas in tailpipes.
A taped banana to the tailpipe.
But
tuck in your jersey, miscreant.
Yeah. But right, it's such an odd season for them because there's probably zero chance they win a championship, but they're kind of good. And I think that arena, having fans who are interested, is probably good enough for them, but they should blow it up. Steven Adams is on the block. CP3 probably should go to Miami. Nerlens Noel, who knows?
Build around Nerlens.
I think every team, 29 teams in the NBA, should be thinking about building around Nerlens. He's going to be, I believe, an unrestricted free agent this summer. He is as good as we think he is, so whatever.
I mean, this is a pro Nerlens pod, and it will always be, so, deal with it.
I mean, was that the last time? Was the end of Embiid's innocence when Nerlens got ripped away from his arms?
He's never been happy again. Even that airplane move against Toronto, you could sense an undercurrent of wishing Nerlens was a passenger in first class.
Wolverine meme of him petting the Nerlens framed photo.
So OKC is 1-6 of 8. They're not a bad team, and I like them. They are a bunch of dudes who I've rooted for, even though Gallinari is hurt like he always is. Love Gallinari, love Nerlens, love CP3. They're secretly a good team of people that I enjoy watching.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to be really good. But isn't this what we talk about all the time? Isn't this NBA purgatory?
Absolutely.
There's no way out of this. There's no better. There's only worse. I think this team is not better than this.
But here's the question.
What's up?
We talk about basketball franchises in a binary sense all the time. It's win a championship, be close to winning a championship, or get back in the dumpster where you belong.
Get back under the highway where you belong.
Is there not some amount of joy here, though, in a team like OKC, doing better than people thought, with some likable players, winning some games, in a season when you know you don't have the talent to be great? Is overachieving the worst thing to do for a season like this?
Oh man, that's a good question. If I was an OKC fan, I'd be ecstatic because Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is young, and I think he presents the idea of hope. You can put your hope container on him, but
a hope container.
Dump all your hope into that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander container for sure. He works. Everything checks out with him. And yeah, it might not be the best thing for them. And do they have their own pick this year?
It's protected. It would go to Philadelphia if it's after 20.
All right.
So they're most likely, they would have to, it's not even one of those ones lottery protected. They actually have to be a top 10 team to give it up, and that's really unlikely.
Right. Yeah.
Otherwise, it converts as two second rounders. It was from the Jeremy Grant deal.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what you can get for Steven Adams, but something. I don't know what you can get for CP3, at this point with his contract.
I'm not all in on selling here because you have all these picks from the Clippers. You have a bunch of picks from the Rockets.
But those aren't good picks.
They're not good picks.
They're not.
But you have a bunch of picks anyway. You have them at least.
Yes.
You have an okay team. If someone offers you a first rounder for Steven Adams, sure, trade him off.
He's not going to return a first rounder. I don't.
But
think.
that's what I'm saying. I don't think you're going to get enough that makes it like, all right, let's get really shitty and let's try to make our own pick a little more valuable by just sloughing off talent when we're a 500 team. I don't know that they're completely sellers.
They're cap space boys. In my opinion,
they might be.
I think they should sell. I hate purgatory. This is just, they're stuck, man.
But this is not a permanent purgatory, as I was saying when I introduced this wonderful, insightful segment on the Thunder. Is that at any time they can just say, all right, we're going to dump these guys and we're just going to have young dudes play and we're going to be terrible. They can do that at any time.
How are they going to dump CP3? That's challenging, man.
Well, you can't really dump him unless you trade him to Miami for just like guys who are expiring or something.
Yeah, it's like that proposition is trickier than it seems, even though he's really good.
That would seem to be the keystone that you would remove if you wanted to take this all apart. Because CP3 is still good enough that you're going to have a mediocre offense just with him on the floor.
He makes like 5 teams championship contenders.
I mean, if Miami's like, we'll give you Dragic, I think he's expiring, and a few other expiring contracts, and there was some picks involved. Miami becomes a very tough team with Jimmy Butler and Bam and CP3. Mm-hmm. There is a reason to commit to his contracts if you want to make a leap and you don't see another way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Miami would be the one.
Knicks, CP3, Kevin Love, Andrew Wiggins.
What?
5 seed, baby.
Take me to the Garden. Oh man, and Knicks fans would be like, Knicks back. We got Chris Paul. We got 3 Hall of Famers on our roster. Andrew Wiggins.
No bullshit, except for the Andrew Wiggins part, which is bullshit. If they got Kevin Love and Chris Paul, that would be a kind of good, fun, watchable team with Mitchell Robinson. Like, I'm into that team. CP3 throwing lobs to Mitch, Kevin Love spacing the floor, and then a couple of their anonymous wings just sort of sticking around. Kind of into that team.
Get out of here. Well, the Knicks have like fun built into them. That's why they should always be playing on Christmas Day. But get out of here, man.
Dolan, if you're listening, this is the rebuild. CP3, Kevin Love, get some guys in their 30s. They understand the game. They're vets. Taj Gibson, Chris Paul, Kevin Love.
You're GMing with so much hate in your heart, man. That would be a hate watch for sure.
Would you not go to the Garden to watch Kevin Love and CP3?
It would be hilarious. Of course I'd be there. Popcorn. That's my preferred snack at the Garden now.
The Garden would be rocking. Make it happen.
Yeah, Brooklyn's is not hip-hop enough for Kevin Love and CP3.
I remember interviewing Kevin Love, and he mentioned Jay-Z like 7 times during the course of the interview.
What year was this? Because Jay-Z had a run, man.
I don't know, it was probably like 7, 8 years ago.
No, okay, wrong era. God, Jay-Z's been around forever. He just turned 50, right?
Yeah. But yeah, Kevin Love just loved Jay-Z. He's like, I mostly listen to Jay-Z in my headphones. I'd wear this jacket like Jay-Z would. I don't know. It was just so much Jay-Z.
Yo, Kevin Love was kind of rap coming out of high school. And even in UCLA, he kind of looked like, he was kind of a chubbier. No kink shaming. He was perfect the way he was. He had a little mustache. He had like a haircut.
He had a chin strap beard.
Yeah. He looked kind of rap. And then he kind of turned into GQ style. But
does Kevin Love have bars?
Yes, I'm going to say he does. What would be his rap name?
K-Love.
Done.
I mean, it sounds like a Los Angeles radio station already.
So what would be the rap supergroup in the NBA? Tyler Johnson, Kevin Love.
No. This is why he's trying to get to Portland.
Oh, wow. It's
why
Dollar Dame.
Wait, he was in commercials rapping with Dame.
Oh man, baby
Little
Kevin
Kev.
Love
Little
with
Kev.
those chains. Man, I think we're onto something. But I fell asleep. So you were saying the Blazers? Go on. Okay, I heard Blazers,
CJ
and I passed out.
CJ McCollum. Anyway, we now know they're trying to put a supergroup together.
Amazing.
And it's based on that State Farm commercial.
It is. I think we've solved the riddle of Kevin of
The
K
new
Love.
banana. It's the new banana boat. It's the bars boat.
Who would be special sauce? Mello. It's Mello. The answer is Mello, man. The answer for everything is Carmelo Anthony.
Agreed. Love it. I think that's all the NBA news we have for this week. It's been a sort of slow week for the post-Fizz. Well, I think we're all dealing with the decarbonation of the news cycle with the Fizz taken out.
Yo, where's Fizz gonna land? He's definitely assistant coach material. He's awesome.
The Lakers have like 7 assistants. I say bring them in.
Let's do this. Is a Ramby on the Lakers? Where's the gift of the Ramby?
He's lurking. His wife is kind of running the show. But they've got Jason Kidd. He's in the wings.
Yeah, the rumor is Jason Kidd to lure Giannis into the Compo and free agency.
I honestly think of this: Jason Kidd, Giannis, Kevin Love, Chris Paul, championship team in the Garden 2020, and Kawhi.
And Kawhi.
They're all coming.
Rings, baby.
They're coming, baby. They're coming to the Garden.
Okay, quickly. I think it takes 2 years to rebuild the Knicks. What has to happen in those 2 years?
Are you talking about after they get Chris Paul or no?
Post Chris Paul, I think this team is rebuild. This team has enough going for it that they could be back in the NBA sooner than you think. And I think all it takes is to hit on this top 3 pick, and there's the top 2 are pretty safe. I think LaMelo and Anthony Edwards, the Top Gun, are safe picks. And then
All right.
What?
I've had it with the KBB. The problem here is the Knicks made a crucial error. And it was they should have been really bad in the years before the odds got leveled out.
Forget that stuff. We're starting fresh, man.
Okay, we're
Put
starting
on that
fresh.
white face paint.
Well, then they have to do what the Nets did. You have to accept that you're going to be bad for several years. You have to act as if you are building without draft picks.
I don't
you
even.
Have to,
so
you have to trade your existing players for them. You have to use your cap space to add draft picks, and then you are bad and you get your pick. Like the blueprint's not hard. The guys they have are mediocre players. You have to give them an opportunity to show you whether they are actual valuable commodities, to use like a gross way of phrasing it around players, or they're just guys that you can cycle through. We know what to do.
Yes.
Philly did it. Brooklyn did it. Atlanta's doing it. There's it's not a puzzle.
Well, the premise of this point is I don't think they have to be smart. I think they can remain under the highway dancing and accidentally run into success.
I disagree.
I don't know, man. Dan Gilbert. Comic Sans, baby.
I know, but I disagree. I think the leveling of the odds has made it much, much tougher for super stupid teams. You still could get lucky.
You can get lucky.
Lucky, but it is harder. There is not that built-in reward for just sucking.
I'm not saying it's built in, but the Knicks will not wash the face paint off anytime soon, as we know. And I still think all is not lost. Like,
if they hire a good, competent GM,
they don't even need to do that.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
That's where we veer apart here. I just cannot see the Knicks figuring this out with the current administration, with a bad GM. I just don't think it's possible.
I think figuring it out is the phrase that I would change. I think things like a player could just choose to go to New York just to be difficult, or be like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. and everything changes after that. Whether that be a Giannis or a K Love, or Andrew Wiggins, like future Hall of Famer Andrew Wiggins.
I mean, it's true, but this is what they've been attempting for years, and it's accurate. If on a small chance Giannis says, "I'm going to leave my successful contender and join a terrible team in New York because I want to play in the Garden," then yes, they don't have to smarten up. They don't have to do anything. They can just wait for Giannis to decamp from Milwaukee, where his team has the best record in basketball.
Their ratings are wild. That team is very good.
And head on down to Gotham to play with Kevin Knox.
Katz's pastrami before every game.
Good luck with that, Kuo.
Well, I'm just saying
what do you got?
We're angry at the wrong thing, and you can't change somebody. The Knicks are who they are, so we have to work with them and not change them. And the chances of them being good are very, very low. But let's not kink shame their vibe. I'm trying, man. Come on.
I agree. Let's not kink shame their vibe.
I love cookies.
Let's just call it here. Otherwise, we're going to keep talking about the Knicks. I feel like this has been a solid, quasi-abbreviated, at an hour and 15 minutes episode of Cookies. But I'm content to move on to next week.
To be continued.
Cookies.